What's up, guys? It is Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, race show time. Tonight is definitely a brewski night. So I got my brewski with me. It's been raining for the past 4 days or so. Yeah, 4 days. Yep, 4 days. Um, and again, I apologize. My voice still sounds crappy. Gonna go get it checked out tomorrow. I don't know what it is. Hopefully nothing serious. But I think it might be some kind of infection, respiratory infection that is affecting my voice, but I'm not feeling sick in any way. So still being active, doing my work and going to the gym every morning, and nothing's bothering me. So like I said, hopefully nothing serious there. But got an exciting show for you guys. We're going to be talking about carburetors, bracket racing, and nitrous stuff, and a bunch of other old school stuff that I might not even understand myself. So we're going to bring on our guest, Mr. Craig Serra. How are you, sir?
What's up, bud? How you doing?
Good, good. What's going on in Florida?
Well, we're kind of getting ready for this hurricane here. I mean, we can get blown away or we can just get a little bit of water. Who knows?
So you're the reason why I'm getting all this rain up here.
Yes. Yep. We're kicking it right your direction.
So the way the storm is traveling, I haven't been following it much. I know it's like on the Gulf, right? But is it going towards you guys, or is it kind of going away?
Well, it's kind of shifted out into the Gulf a little bit more, which probably makes it a bigger storm in some ways from what my experience is. But it looks like it's going to miss us and go up into the Panhandle, into Tallahassee and that area up that way. But we're still going to get some outer bands from it. We've been getting a crazy amount of rain this year. I mean, we've had a lot of rainouts at the racetrack, and I don't know if you guys saw Cletus's video a couple weeks ago or a month ago, whenever it was, when he's driving the boat down the drag strip at Bradenton. But
Yeah.
that's our house and shop and everything's only 15, 20 minutes from that track. So we've been getting a lot of rain anyway. So we don't need any of this right now. And I'm kind of expecting some flooding, but hey, it is what it is. It's Mother Nature. There's nothing we can do about it.
So I actually talked about that on a few episodes ago about the flooding at that track. And you probably know better than me. Like, why is there so much flooding now? Is it because of all the construction going on?
I believe wholeheartedly that's what it is. I mean, they're building a lot of houses and a lot of apartments and everything else. And this was area that it was saturated. I mean, some of it was even swampy type land or what have you. And they think they're fixing the problem by putting these retention ponds or what have you there, but it's not a fix. I mean, it's proven that that there's areas that are flooding nowadays and Florida's always got hurricanes and always got a decent amount of rain, and flooding happened, but not so often like it happens nowadays.
Right. Um, and guys, don't forget, like this, comment on it, ask questions, heart it, give it a thumbs down if you want. Anything helps. So even if
Like
you
and
don't like
share.
the show, yeah, even if you don't like the show, you want to give me a thumbs down, that's fine. That helps me out. So, um, but I guess let's start from the beginning. You know, how did you how did you get into cars? So you own TRC, right?
Total
Uh
racing components. Yep.
Motor Racing Components. You specialize in carburetors, race engines, and just performance parts in general, and dyno tuning. Correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
I've been doing the tuning is really what I love to do. I mean, whether it be on the engine dyno or the chassis dyno or whatever, and I travel around doing some of that stuff and have my own chassis dyno and everything. But yeah, carburetors is something we've done for a lot of years, and it's the heart and soul of the engine. I mean, everybody wants to think, oh, fuel injection, oh, it's the latest greatest thing, which it's absolutely great. I have no problem at all with fuel injection, but don't leave the carburetor behind. I mean, in some cases, it'll even make more horsepower, but um, it will definitely. It's a lot less expensive to run. I mean, to do a really, really good fuel injection nowadays. I mean, Lewis. I mean, it's 10 grand, and then you have to have a bunch of spare parts.
Yep.
A great carburetor is maybe $2,000 on the high side. But your average carburetor for most of the cars that are out there are somewhere around $1,800, $1,500. uh, and it's still a great way to make a lot of power. And most racers can um, they can take them apart in their sleep, or if you, especially in the bracket racing world, or even a lot of the grudge racing stuff, if you mess up something in the carburetor, you take it apart, you spray it out with some brake cleaning, you put it back together if it was a good
Mm.
running carburetor to begin with. In some cases, if you have a problem, you can go to the guy next to you and he has a jet or a needle and seed or something simple and it's cheap to have as for spare parts, where fuel injection, I know guys that have chased ground issues for weeks, much less fixing it between
Yeah.
rounds. So the carburetor is better in a lot of ways, but I'm not discarding the fuel injection. I mean, I know an okay amount about the fuel injection, but carburetors is where my heart and soul is.
Yeah, and I personally had a few of your carburetors on my cars. They work awesome. I understand it. You know what I mean? To not the extent of you, right? But I understand it. I can take my own car to the track if it's carbureted. I don't need a tuner with me like I usually do with my fuel injected car, right? Um, and it's easier for me to wire. I could do it myself if I wanted to, right? Where I was actually just talking to a bunch of guys today about figuring out, you know, who I'm going to take my fuel injected car to get wired. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because you got to figure that out too. You know what I mean? That's a
Yeah.
whole different animal. You know what I mean? It can't just be, I can't do it myself. You know what I mean? It's got to be done by a professional where I can slap on a carburetor, hook up a few
Couple of
wires here
fuel
and
lines.
there.
Yep.
Yeah, and fuel lines and be good to go. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
Hmm.
um, so how did you get into uh, you know, total racing components and drag racing and cars in general?
We'll kind of start back from the beginning, and I guess this is my grandfather's fault. I mean, he raced circle track back in the day, but really, my dad was the one who got involved in the drag racing because back when my grandfather was doing it, there wasn't really much drag racing going on. I mean, we're talking in the 30s or whatever. So my history in the racing world goes back a long time. Um, Technically, my granddaughters are fifth generation racers, which it's in our blood, and but we're gonna blame most of this on my dad. I mean, I was screwed right from the beginning. I mean, he started in the '60s, and you know they hoboshed some stuff together, and they had a lot of fun with it. And um, my dad raced fuel dragsters and then on to B modified production in the '70s and stuff like that. So um he kept involved, and then he stopped racing and really started the building engines. I mean, he had a company in Orlando that he built a lot of street engines and things like that. I mean, through the '70s, it was not uncommon to have a 11-second or 10-second streak, which was crazy fast back then, but they were
Mm.
driving them all the time.
Yeah.
They drove them to the track and raced them and whatever, but he worked on a lot of those cars. And then in the '80s, he started Total Racing Components, well, actually, let me back up just a little bit. He worked for a Reed Chems, near Atlanta, Georgia, and the NASCAR market came out. They originally ran Dominators in for NASCAR. If that sounds kind of crazy, but that's where the Dominator kind of came from. But Ford engineers designed the Dominator and for Holly.
Mhm.
Originally, they were going to just run it on Ford NASCAR applications, but they NASCAR made them available to everybody. Well, then NASCAR came out with a rule in the early '70s that you could put any carburetor you wanted on there as long as the throttle body was 1 and 11/16. So my dad and John Reed and a couple other guys did a lot of dyno testing and development, and basically took your old 4779, which is the really really popular 750 double pumper from back in the day, and cut the choke horn off and radius the corners and really made it flow some CFM. They took a 750 and actually got it to flow over 1,000 CFM by just making the airspeed faster, which in turn was worked with a lot of applications. We found out after the fact that they used them on NASCAR applications.
Oh, that's cool. So, I showed a picture earlier. This was his dragster, right?
Yeah, that was his uh, top gas dragster,
Yep.
front engine dragster. I that was before me, so I never really saw that, but I heard tons of stories on it, and story. And he used to race front engine alters and stuff like that as well. Told me stories of, because the alters back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, even the dragsters for that matter. I mean, there was kind of a early no prep situation, if you want to make sense out of it.
Hmm.
The cars never went straight, and they put the lightest guy in it. And my dad was, kind of a small, slender guy back then, so he was hired to drive the thing. So he told me one time where he went through the finish line backwards in an altered, and thought nothing of it. He also, I said, well, did you ever beat Don Garlits? And he said, well, yeah. He says, but he blew the blower, so that was the only way I was able to beat him. But
That
because he raced all through Florida, and knew all those guys from growing up. Big Daddy Don Garlits. Who doesn't know about him? But him and my dad are friends.
yeah, I was just gonna ask you, that picture looks like it was taken in Florida.
Yeah, that was in Miami. Which was was a hotbed of racing back in the day. I mean, he was really good friends with Jerry Gwynn, which is Daryl Gwynn. I don't know if you remember Daryl Gwynn or not, but his father. But they were actually in a car club together, so they knew each other real well.
Gotcha. Um, so I actually have a picture. I think you sent me this. I think this was a very early
Yep.
TRC carb, right?
Yep, we did all that racing by hand, and in some ways the HP style carburetor was. And I'm not going to say that Holly copied us, but we were first in this situation, and really developed that carburetor. But that particular carburetor right there used to have a regular choke horn on it. We milled the choke horn off, and that's how I got. I mean, at 12 years old, I was actually starting to grind on carburetors and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Oh
But
wow.
but all that radius and everything was all done by hand. We didn't have CNC machines back then, and we had flow benches to make sure each venturi flowed the same, and some of that technology from back then, but not the modern technology we have today that makes it a lot easier for me to make a carburetor.
Wow. And this was this the
That's the
finished
same
product?
carburetor but rebuilt. The
Yeah.
first picture you showed was it was a funny story. The guy bought the carburetor brand new. He still had the original flow chart with it, and he bought it in 1982, which was early on in us building carburetors. And he was the original owner of it, ran it for a lot of years, and then he just sent it back to me about a year or two ago for a freshen up, and that was the same carburetor after we did the freshen up to
I wasn't even born then.
it.
That's how old that is. Oh my
Yep,
god. That's
yep.
crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
we made too good a product. It lasted 40 years before the guy actually sent it back in to get rebuilt.
wow. So, obviously you guys are still doing carburetors at TRC now. What else are you guys doing now? Any cool projects? I know you were recently on Cletus's show,
Yep. Carburetor
right?
Craig.
How did that come about? How did you meet Cletus and how did you end up on his show? Because it seems to me it was kind of like almost like by accident type of deal.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, uh, I've kind of spread my wings at my shop, and I do some car restorations and things like that as well. So we do paint and body and that type of thing, along with the carburetors. That's kind of a separate business within itself. And building engines kind of goes with the carburetors. But Cletus was building a uh, kind of a custom truck, a giveaway type deal. It's a TRX truck that he was making into a two door, and he had somebody else do the modification and get rid of the second set of doors. But he needed somebody to do the interior, and we do upholstery and everything in house as well. And we did a jam up job of making his interior look like it came that way from the factory. So he actually reached out to some locals here looking for a good upholstery shop, and I messaged him, and we got to chatting a little bit, and kind of hit it off. So since then, I've done a few projects with him, and that wheel standing uh, Fiero that he had there, it kind of sat around for a while, and it needed some love in the carburetor world, and so that's he said, I know a guy, so because
Right.
I had actually my dyno was down for a bit, so I needed to do some development work with my dragster and with the carburetor, a new carburetor that I came out with, and I used his chassis dyno to do that. I mean, his shop is only 15 minutes from us, and they're a great group of guys. I mean, they like to have fun and beat some stuff up or whatever. But honestly, they're really, really smart, and they're just a great group of guys.
Yeah, I like the video, and I wish I had it. I should have downloaded it or something. The video of the reel he made of the car crashing into the wall, and he said it was your fault.
Yep, yep. Well, before I came into the picture, it wouldn't even do a wheelie. So yeah, that's why it's my fault. I mean, I made it responsive, and it was actually catching on fire and all kinds of crazy stuff before they called me. But I did a really, really quick rebuild at the shop just to make sure that everything was going to work right. And we took it in the parking lot, did a couple little wheelies with it, but then ended up taking the carburetor back to my shop and cleaning it in the acid and doing it right, and then doing some modifications to make it more responsive and things of that nature. But yeah, it definitely did a wheelie after we were done with it.
That's great. What other ventures do you have going on right now? Any exciting stuff going on right now?
Yeah, we got some big things coming up. I mean, we're expanding our shop. I mean, we're putting some new stuff together, and we're going to be doing a lot of things in house. I mean, one of the reasons we relocated to Florida is because you don't have 8 months out of the year that everybody puts their stuff away, and it's cold and snowy and everything else. I mean,
Oh yeah, it
you got
sucks.
guys down here that drive their muscle cars back and forth to work every single day for 365 days a year or whatever.
Yep.
And so the muscle car world is something that I love to do. The tuning on the muscle cars and making something cool out of them and things like that. That's a passion that any true kid with a Hot Wheel back in the day has. And so we're doing paint and body. We do upholstery. We do assembly. We're going to do some, we do some resto mods where we're putting the newer style engines in some of the older cars, and making cool stuff out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to see um if he sent me any of that. I don't think he sent me any of that resto mod stuff.
No, no. The
Uh,
a- and what makes me so good in the carburetor and engine world is because I don't just do one particular thing, and I can take we do a lot of circle track stuff, and what I know and learned over the years in the circle track world, I can apply to drag racing and vice versa. And it goes the same way with some of the street car stuff. I mean, you gotta treat each car a little bit differently, and the different weights and things of that nature. It's going to use different amount of fuels, and all that. Me doing multiple things really helps that.
I agree. I'm trying to see here. I'm pulling up one of your old pictures. So I have to ask, do you still have those shorts?
I definitely still have the shorts. I mean, I don't know that I could fit in them anymore because I probably weighed about 145 pounds in that picture, and that picture, believe it or not, I'll give you a little bit of a story with it. We built that car that was my daily driver. We had multiple type engine combinations, but we originally built it, and I got 23 miles to the gallon on the interstate, 18 around town, and the car ran in the 12s at the drag strip just the way that I drove it there.
That's amazing.
And that was without the technology of fuel injection. I mean, that was with just picking the right camshaft, and the camshaft goes along with the carburetor. It works; they kind of work hand in hand. And we know a lot about camshafts because of the fact that if you remember correctly, we started TRC, back when we were at Reed Camps. But that picture was taken in Indianapolis at Super Chevy. I'm going to guess probably 1984, maybe. I drove
Still
the
wasn't
car
born.
from Atlanta to Super Chevy in Indianapolis, and that's how we kind of did the test. But we did some of that for Hot Rod Magazine, back when there was magazines,
Mhm.
and we did a lot of development work with it, and really helped out. But it was really cool to. I mean, I was 16, 17 in that picture or something like that.
Wow.
And but yeah, still have the shorts and can't fit in them.
Oh man. So this was also your car too, right?
Yep, that was my first real race car. I bought that car from a guy, and he was one of our customers. And actually, I'll back up a little bit. I didn't buy shit. My dad bought it.
Right.
He bought it for me and gave it to me for my 18th birthday. And which was good because we kind of stepped ahead a little bit here. My dad, the Nova that you see there, I bought that when I was 15 years old. It was just a regular Nova with a 307 in it, and I was a couple $100 short on buying the thing. My dad loaned me the money and charged me interest. So,
Smart
but the race
man.
car, he made it up on the race car. They gave that to me for my 18th birthday, and my first trip to the racetrack, um, the throttle stuck wide open coming out of the burnout. And so I had to figure out how to stop this thing and everything else. And obviously, that was a 10-second car, and which was really fast for back then. And I went from a 12-second car in the Nova to the 10-second car, and it was just a little overwhelming, when you're only 18 years old. So
Right.
I guess I handled it pretty good because we kept going.
Hey, that's pretty scary. I've had a throttle stick on me once as well. At Piedmont Dragway, and that was not fun.
No, no.
So,
I
uh,
actually had in that same car after I got some experience in it. I had the throttle cable. No, the return spring came off. I mean, you have to understand that things were antiquated back then. The thing came off as I'm going down the racetrack, and the throttle stuck wide open going through the finish line, and I actually had to pull it in low gear and do all kinds of crazy stuff. But we were racing at a place called Warner Robins Dragway, which is in central Georgia. This drag strip was kind of a weird deal. It had a grass median going down the middle of the drag strip, and they ran fuel funny cars and everything else there. So that was kind of crazy. But it had a cornfield or soybean field or something at the end of it. And I kind of went off in the end of it, kind of slow, so it didn't damage anything. But yeah, having the throttle stick in the same car a couple times is kind of crazy.
yeah, that is pretty crazy. And is this Camaro the same one or a different one? Hold on, I'm trying to find the photo here. Um, Here we go.
No, that's my dad's '69 Camaro. That was a B modified production car. That car was the cool of cool. That car was big block Chevy with a shoebox tonneram on it and a 4-speed. And when it left the line with the wheels in the air. And each time he pulled the gear, it pulled the wheels again, which was definitely the cool part of it. And
That's
back
awesome.
then, they turned the shit out of engines. I mean, it was a 427, and he probably still turned it 8,500 RPM or so.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. Um, so, you your children still race?
Yep.
Well, at least one of them still does, right?
Oh my! Actually,
Um,
my daughter's getting into it again too. She raced junior dragsters back in the day, and kind of took a hiatus. But she has she lives with her boyfriend that they come from a racing family as well, the Northrops. A lot of people know Dan Northrop in the bracket racing world up in that area, and then Dave Northrop, her boyfriend's dad, raced pro stock. So he's kind of getting her back into the racing deal, and talking about building it. He has a Fox body laying around that he's going to put together, and I'm going to build an engine for it. And she got some laps here about a year or so ago in a 12-second Camaro that they had, but it still got the itch again.
that's
But yeah,
that's
and
good.
then Jeff races, and then Sean raced.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about them and, because your kids have accomplished so much in the racing world. Um, so, Jeff is still racing, probably
Hmm.
arguably one of the best bracket racers to ever do it, you know.
Hmm.
So what's Jeff doing now? Because when did he won the one of the $1 million races? What was it, like 2 years ago
Three
or
years
so?
ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. Actually, it's been 4 years now. It's 2000. I think it was 2020, but it's been 3 or 4 years or whatever.
This
But yeah,
one?
yeah, that one there. Yeah, and that's one of the first races. I mean, they've had the million that's kind of prorated and things like that, and it's an awesome race. But this race actually paid $1 million to win, and it was only the second race to ever do that. The other race was SFG, paid 1.1 because they just wanted to upstage them just a little bit.
Right.
But to win a race of that caliber, and I'll tell you a funny story. I mean, this kind of goes back to the driver that he is. They broke the engine. He was driving that car for a friend of mine, and they broke the engine early in the week. And they had to borrow. It had a pretty stout small block Chevy in it. Goes low fives in the eighth mile, and they had to borrow an engine, but they didn't have torque converter. They didn't have a carburetor to go with it. So I mean, they went from a pretty stout small block Chevy to a uh, your average small block Chevy that maybe made 600 horsepower, and they had to put the carburetor off of the 800 horsepower small block on there and the torque
Yep.
converter and everything else. So they were just barely going to make it the first round. I mean, they got no time runs or anything like that. And the owner of the car, he says, I don't even know if it's going to do a burnout. And so he went up there and he got past first round and kind of figured out where the car was going to be, and just kind of got in the sweet spot. But he was holding some. I mean, with the heads up grudge guys might not know about it a little bit, but in the bracket racing world, I mean, we're trying to change the look of the race to the other drivers. So therefore, if we miss the tree, sometimes we're still ahead and can get behind or whatever we need to do at the top end. So it's not uncommon for Jeff to hold a 10th or whatever. And it turned out
Right.
first round he was holding, if I remember correctly, about a half a second. So
Oh, wow.
and because he knew he needed to get there,
Right.
but yeah, ended up going through the field, and that was a relatively large field. I'm pretty sure it was like a 10-round race, like most of those are, and got three-quarters of the way through the race, and it's like, well, maybe we can win this thing,
Wow.
So basically, a broke race car and takes the thing to the final and wins the race at $1 million.
Wow. What a Cinderella story.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
And do you know if he prefers to drive door cars or dragsters, or he doesn't care?
Jeff will drive anything. I mean, he was him and Sean used to race in the backyard. We had kind of a hilly backyard in Pennsylvania, and they had them the cozy coupes, and Jeff couldn't fit in it at the time, but Jeff and Sean just barely fit in it. But they would they'd run down the hill and race each other and crash the thing and burn and whatever. And
That's
it was
hilarious.
so basically and they started early on when they were young. They used the guy that I pitted next to had an old ramp truck, and they used to take connects. I don't know if you know what connects are, but they're basically they make cars out of them or whatever, and they kind of pop together like Legos,
Mhm.
and or even make Lego cars. And they would race them down this thing, and sometimes at the end they crash and they fall apart and everything else. But they had whole national events, and it kind of goes back to when I was a kid. I mean, me and my brother used to have Hot Wheel national events in the hallway, and we'd have them lined up in the staging lanes and all that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
it goes back to the roots.
Yeah. And this was Jeff in his top dragster, correct?
Yep,
Back in the
his
day.
first year racing top dragster. I mean, that was a car that we built, had a 18 degree 632 nitrous motor. I mean, it went 680s in the quarter with the nitrous on it and everything. He was only 19 years old, and my wife thought I was absolutely crazy because the first time he drove the thing, it did 983 60 foot on the back tires, and it carried the front tires probably about 3 foot in the air the first time it left the starting line. I'm like, I got to back the nitrous down a little bit. But we, he ended up, winning a few rounds that first race with it. And, but the first time it left, my wife was knocking the shit out of me.
Oh, wow.
And, but Jeff thought it was great, doing a wheelie in a dragster. I mean, that not too many people are doing wheelies and dragsters, but,
Right, right.
he thought it was
Well,
great. But anyway, his first year racing top dragster at 19 years old, he won the divisional champion. They didn't have national champions in top dragster back then, but he won the divisional champion, which was a pretty big accomplishment.
that's awesome. So it kind of, I guess, foreshadowed his future,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yep. I mean,
And
Jeff and Sean and even Miranda were really they're way more talented at racing than I am. And that's why I like the tuning aspects of things. I mean, I stopped racing myself for a number of years and just basically tune their stuff. From the junior dragsters on up. I mean, Sean raced outlaw junior dragster, which was heads up first one to the finish line, like Top Fuel stuff. It was they raced to the 330. And they were badass cars. We drove for half scale, which they owned the car and all the stuff. But me and Randy, the guy at half scale, we had to tune the clutch and tune the engine and all kinds of crazy stuff. So we came back from a run at Indy one time, and we didn't really go as fast as we wanted to, and Randy was right in there with a different engine, so we popped an engine on between rounds and made it to the next round and to go faster. I mean, it was just like top fuel stuff. So that it all started from the beginning. I mean, it was,
Right.
like I said, my dad made it screwed for all of us to love the love of cars, but I guess it's a good thing we didn't get in trouble.
Yeah, I always say, racing's expensive, but, things like drugs will get you in trouble, right?
Yeah. Well, hell, any hobby's expensive. You can make fishing expensive if you really want it to be.
True, true. And obviously Sean was a very accomplished racer himself.
Yep.
God rest his soul.
Yep.
Um, but being so young and he did a lot of things.
Yep.
Um, one of them being he didn't he was teaching some of the people from overseas how to race.
Yep.
How what was that about? Because I know you told me that story many times about how he got that opportunity and how he called his shot like I'm gonna run this ET or I'm gonna run this at the tree and he got it.
Yep. A lot of people might think we're crazy, but we sent him overseas at 18 years old, over in Qatar. And he was in charge of the whole junior dragster program over there. He was teaching Sheik's kids how to drive junior dragsters, and he did a very good job at it. He would he would call me, and first time he got there, and it was like October, and because he went over there during the winter time, during the winter months here, which was their racing season over there.
Right.
He got off the plane. He goes, "Dad, it's 140 degrees." I'm like, he said, "That's regular temperature, not anything else." So I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "They want to go play golf." And
That's funny.
so yeah, it was a crazy deal. But how he got that gig was he there again, we worked for, we drove half scales cars, the people who actually invented the junior dragsters, we drove their cars, and they shipped I think it was 9 junior dragsters over to Qatar. And they were having a hard time finding somebody that was knowledgeable enough to work on them, to teach the kids how to drive and maintain the cars and all that type of stuff. And it was a perfect situation for Sean because obviously he didn't have any kids, didn't have a house at the time or anything like that, so he didn't have any real responsibilities here yet. So he could spend 6 months out or 5 months out of the year over there.
Right.
I mean, they put him up in in a great it's like an apartment hotel type deal. I mean, it was like a castle in some cases to some people, but it was they didn't mind spending the money, and they basically covered all of his expenses and everything, and then paid him a healthy wage on top of it. So he was able to put himself, pay for himself to go through college just from working in guitar.
Right.
But then and he was, had people working under him and teaching them how to do the junior dragsters. And like I said, teaching a lot of the kids and stuff like that how to do junior dragsters. He had to do some public speaking at some of the schools, which was obviously probably pretty difficult, being the fact that he didn't speak the language. So that was hard to do, but he loved it. I mean, he had a good time with it. And the next year he went over there, they knew that he drove a regular full-size dragster over here, and they needed somebody to do some test runs or whatever. And he went up there and did one test run, and he was whatever on the tree, kind of normal, because he didn't know what the car was going to do, but I think he was still probably 20 or better.
Right.
And he told the guy that he said, "I'm going to be 005 or better this next run." And the guy's like, "Yeah, get the hell out of here." And he goes up there and he was 004. And so comes back, and the guy's like, "You can't do that again." And he goes up there and he's 000 or something like that. So they kind of knew that he was the driver at that point. And
Right.
he actually got involved in teaching some of the adults how to drive, because they knew the aspects of staging and going down the racetrack, but they didn't know the mechanics of index racing or bracket racing or anything like that in the dragster world. And he taught one guy, and the guy ended up winning the championship. This was like the second or third year he was over there, or whatever. and guy ended up winning the championship. And he was, I don't know if he was a prince or a sheik, or he was somebody like, somebody kind of higher up, important. And they went out to a nightclub afterwards, and Sean Sean told me, he says, Dad, he says, it was like being a rock star. He said they had the ropes around us and they had bodyguards around us and they were bringing us women and drinks and everything else. And so he, obviously enjoyed that part of it.
That's awesome. Good for him.
Yep.
Um, that what an awesome opportunity in drag racing to do that. You know what I mean? And I always say like a really good bracket racer makes a great heads up racer.
Absolutely.
If you guys have been following Travis Harvey lately, Travis started off as a bracket racer,
Yep.
then ended up getting into the grudge world,
Yep.
and now he's driving pro mods. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And he's
And not just driving, he kicked everybody's ass the other week.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of times at the tree. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Absolutely. Yep.
if you can cut a good light, you can definitely gain some numbers,
Hmm.
down track. So
Yep.
um so obviously you do a lot of bracket racing now and stuff.
Yep.
Um and you know, what's I guess what's the best setup for bracket racing? Like um if you were gonna build something for a customer and the customer was like, hey, Craig, money's no option, I want the best setup. What
Hmm.
would you build them?
It's hard anymore because the technology's come full circle. And used to be the dragsters were the easiest thing to make consistent, but now with technology and tires and torque converters and everything else, the door cars are just as consistent in some cases. So it's kind of a preference type deal. I mean, the dragster, the nice thing about a dragster is you can see out of it. In other words, you can see the whole race happening. And it's easy to work on. I mean, hell, if you break a transmission, you can literally fix it between rounds.
Right.
I mean, we messed up a flex plate in the dragster one time, and we were double entered into a race, and we ran early on, messed the flex plate up, it wouldn't start. Went back to the trailer, the flex plate, and was up before the round was over. So it's hard to do in a door car. So that's why the dragsters have become really popular, and it's also a little easier to go fast in a dragster. You make 1,000 horsepower in a dragster, and you're right there in the average area of that 470 in the eighth mile area, which is a nice place to be. You make 800 or 900 horsepower, and you're still at five O's or 490s or something like that, which is not terrible. But to
Right.
make a door car, but you can still win a lot of races in a I mean, there's been a lot of money won in door cars that go 650 and slower, but those cars used to be out first round, and they used to be very difficult to make consistent. But now, I mean, alcohol is definitely a way to go in the bracket racing world. It's you're dealing with less atmospheric pressure in the cylinders to make the car inconsistent, and it's a lot cheaper to run.
Mhm.
Everybody thinks, oh, geez, it's so much maintenance and this and that and the other. Technology's changed in that world too. I mean, you got top
Yeah.
lube, and the way that we do our carburetors, we don't do them so rich, so they're going to milk the oil and all that type of stuff. So that's a little bit different. So as things evolve, things change. But um, if money was no odds, I mean, I like a door car. I mean, I drove like a pro stock style S10 for a friend of mine down here a few years ago, and I had a ball in that thing. I mean, it was pull the wheels when it leaves the starting line, and an S10 you can still see out of it like a dragster almost. I mean, it was hard to see over the hood scoop and a couple little things, but for the most part, it was a fun car to drive. And it went 480s, which is kind of cool to do in a door car, and
Right.
especially in the bracket racing deal. And but it still kind of goes back to a dragster. I mean, the dragster is still the probably the most versatile as far as things are concerned, the easiest to get, the easiest to go fast, and you can still buy a really good four-link dragster that's you buy one that's 20 years old and it's still a good car if it was maintained right. Where
Right.
a door car in a lot of cases it is 20 years old, it's beat to hell.
Yeah. No. Yeah, you're right about that. Uh, you meant so you have a dragster yourself, you bracket race still and things like that.
Yep.
But if money wasn't a problem, would you still build a dragster? Or would you build a door car?
I
What
build a door
class
car
would you
because it's a little
run?
little bit more fun to drive.
Would you
I mean,
still
we're
do
out there for the
bracket
fun of it.
racing, or
What's that?
would you still do bracket racing, or would you like do? like pro mod racing or pro stock racing if money wasn't an issue?
Pro stock racing is probably the hardest racing to do. I mean, that's a difficult car to drive, and I mean, I'm up for the challenge. I don't got no problem with the challenge, but and I would love to go heads up racing. It's just you got to keep up with the Joneses, and it's a lot more expensive to do than bracket racing. I mean, I have a 1200 horsepower engine in my dragster, and I take it apart at 200 250 runs. Where a nitrous grudge type application or any kind of heads up motor, I mean, you're going to put valve springs on them a lot. You're going to do a lot of things, so it's just a lot more expensive. But you mentioned the fact that money's no object. I mean, and pro stock racing actually. I told my wife the other day, I said, "Oh, I'd love to go pro mod racing, but that's way out of the budget. My situation, when somebody else is paying for it, and I'm up for it.
Right. So, just so like the fans know, not only do you do bracket racing stuff, you also do heads up racing stuff, and you also do uh on-site track tuning, correct?
Correct. Yep. Or
Yep.
I've gone to Texas and done some nitrous tuning on the chassis dyno and at the racetrack and things like that. I went to Georgia here not too long ago and did some of that stuff. So yes, I mean honestly, the majority of my customers are probably more heads up type racing or somebody that wants to go fast. I mean, I do it's a little bit different types of heads up racing, but I'm really, really good in the sand drag stuff. I mean, that's heads up. You go 200 feet, 300 feet, whatever it is at that particular racetrack, and it's first one to the finish line, and those guys need to go fast.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun for me as well. Um, my carburetors are not the cheapest carburetor out there, and bracket racers like to do things cheap. As long as it goes from point A to point B and runs relatively consistent, the average bracket racer is okay with that.
Yeah.
Where they're not going to put a $2,000 carburetor on there, where because my carburetor I feel is a little bit better than the next guy's carburetor. I mean, and I'm sure everybody's going to say that. I hope that they have confidence in their product, but I've been doing this a long time. I mean, as we looked at the beginning of the video there, I've been doing this, since I was 12 years old, and I'm not 12 anymore. And so I've been doing it for 40 some odd years, and we learned a lot in the 40 some odd years. And we try to make things go faster. So that's why the grudge and heads up guys are more appealed to my product than a bracket racer in some cases.
Nice. So, do you handle boosted applications?
Yeah, I did a two carburetor application with a Pro Charger and made over like 3,500 horsepower, if I remember correctly, on a hub dyno
Wow.
with two carburetors. So you don't need the fuel injection to necessarily make over 3,000 horsepower.
Uh, so, you I have a picture here. You probably had one of the scariest things ever happen to you. Um,
Yep. Yeah, that was a bad day. I had a brand new. That was my 53-foot trailer. We were on the way to a race. We had just built a dragster for Sean that was only like a week and a half old. It had my daughter's junior dragster in there that was only 6 months old, which everybody thinks, oh, junior dragsters, those are cheap. But no, it was probably $15,000 worth of car.
yeah.
And yeah, I lost about $150,000 in about 15 minutes. What had happened was I had a pit pro nice golf cart. The golf cart was in the back, which we know, everything behind the rear wheels gets beat to death. So I had it strapped down really, really good. But what had happened is it was a gasoline golf cart, and the main power wire went through the chassis and it had rubbed. Um, the reason I know this is somebody pulled up next to me and they said, "Oh, your trailer's smoking." I thought, well, maybe a wheel bearing locked up. I'll pull over slow or whatever.
Right.
Well, I pulled over and there's smoke pouring out of the living quarters windows, and I knew this is kind of serious. But so I opened the back door and I literally put the fire out 3 times before I emptied my fire extinguisher. And then I never fill the golf cart gas tank completely up. It's always got a gallon or two in it, whatever, to get me around the racetrack. I filled the thing up. I mean, what do they hold, 8 gallons or something like that? So as soon as the fire actually got to the gasoline, the whole thing went up. I mean, I had to, Sean was trying to get stuff out of the trailer. I had to tackle him and get him out of the trailer and kind of save that deal. And but it was a nightmare. And then the Pennsylvania Highway Patrol, the guy pulls up behind me, and my stuff is literally still burning to the ground, and nitrous bottles are shooting off, and all kinds of noises going off in there. We carried all kinds of spare stuff with us and everything else. And this cop, all he was worried about was where my license and insurance was. I mean, it was we were at the back of the trailer, and it was in the truck that was in the front of the trailer.
Right.
And flames are shooting out the side and everything else. And this guy just wanted to be an asshole. But that's, I guess that's what they get paid to do.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a pretty sad deal because we had to kind of rebuild from that. And we still had at the time we had another dragster and a Camaro that weren't in there. That was at my shop, and then I had an old 28-foot trailer that I had just bought recently just to have a spare, and we ended up having to race out of that thing. Which that I'm not going to say we were slumming it. We made the best of it, but it's certainly a lot easier to go to the racetrack with all your spare parts and spare tools and be prepared and have a place to stay at the racetrack. It just makes it a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. And was this before like race car insurance and things like that?
Well, race car insurance was available, and but I didn't know it was so easy to get. I mean, you always hear the horror stories. Oh, it's so expensive and everything else.
Right.
But a friend of ours had been run off the road or something like that, and they had lost the whole operation, and they had racers insurance, and it was really easy to get. As a matter of fact, I mean, I have racers insurance now, and it's I mean, it covers my dragster, my Camaro, trailer, spare parts, what have you. As long as I'm not going down the racetrack, this particular insurance goes. So as soon as I stage the car, it cancels, and then as soon as I turn back off the track, it reinstates. In a way, but it's only like $1,100-$1,200 a year, so it's not crazy expensive. So if I'd have known back then that I could have got racers insurance so much cheaper, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. I think a lot of teams take that for granted. There's a lot of money tied up in what we do, and you can lose your shit just like that. You know what I mean? So
Well, everybody thinks, oh, that's never going to happen to me, but
mhm.
it happens.
Yeah, it does.
And you
Um,
can even get, I mean, I looked into getting on track insurance, and even on track insurance is not that expensive. It's like double, but if something happens to your car on track, I mean, it's covered.
right, right. So uh, tell me one thing you love about this industry, and tell me one thing you hate about this industry.
I probably can't tell you all the things that I hate about the industry, but we'll get there. Uh, I mean, what I do love about it is, it's a family. I mean, there's no taboo thing, but there's no racism at the racetrack. I mean, you're just guys or girls or whatever. I mean, there's no sexism, and none of it.
Right.
You're just a bunch of group of people that hang out together, and you'll do anything for each other. I mean, I can tell you that I raced a Capitol Dragway one time, and the alternator wire had burned up in the dragster going from the alternator all the way up to the battery, which was in the front, and it burned up a bunch of wires kind of with it and what have you. And we were still in. It was like third round or something like that, maybe fourth. So it was a few rounds into the race, and I'm thinking we're out of this deal. So I
Right.
started kind of clipping and cutting and whatever, took all the body panels off, and I had people that I didn't even know come up to me and, hey, I just wired my car, and I got a bunch of wires in my trailer, and I got this and that and the other, and they're chipping in and doing. I didn't know some of these people.
Yeah.
And that's what I really love about the sport is we can all get along, and no matter what's going on in the world, it's we're all family.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. It's definitely my escape. Um, when I'm at the racetrack, I don't think about anything else, which is therapeutic, you can say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had some bad days at work or this and that and the other, and the old saying is true. I mean, there's no bad day at the racetrack,
Yeah.
unless something drastic happens, and it can happen. But it's for the most part, like you said, I mean, you forget what happened to you earlier in the week, and you concentrating on what you're doing, and we're having a good time with it. I mean, luckily in my life, it's a constant racetrack because I mean I make my living with cars. I mean
Yeah.
I have a really shitty job. I get paid to talk to people about hot rods and race cars and all that type of stuff all day long, and I get to drive some of the coolest cars and everything else. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got back into the classic and muscle cars is because I was I was just driving a '69 Camaro big block 4-speed car the other day, and it's really funny. I was driving this car, and I pulled up at a traffic light, and it's got a big cam in it. It sounds pretty nasty,
Uh-huh.
and it's just a kind of a semi-stock looking, '69 Camaro. And I was doing some work on it, so I needed to test drive it. So I drove it, and this lady in a, I don't know, she was in a Prius or something like that, looks over at me and just has this snarl on her face like I'm killing every tree on the planet, and 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 not any good for anybody. And so what did I do? I gave it a rev.
Right. You're
You
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, yeah, I gave it a, one of them good repas, and so I took off from the traffic light and everything was fine. So the next day, I'm driving the same car, and I'm in town here in Bradenton, and pull up at the traffic light. An old lady pulls up next to me, and I don't remember what she was driving, just something average or whatever. And she rolls down the window, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get it this time. She goes, save all them cars, and she was giving me thumbs up and really loved it. So it's it's a lot of fun to do what I do.
That's amazing. That is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I if anybody has questions, Jesus loves race cars, by the way. So, um, but what's one thing you hate about the industry?
It gets so expensive sometimes. I mean, hell, I was watching NHRA TV here a couple weeks ago, and I'm watching drag racing from like the early '80s, and they're doing dry hops and all that type of stuff, and they are, uh, there was personality in funny cars and pro stock and what have you. We've lost that. The corporate world is kind of did it to us, but it's helped us in a way, but. And we kind of, I guess we did it to ourselves. I mean, everybody wanted to go faster, and it takes money to do that. And
Right.
but so it's a necessary evil, as they say.
Well, it's funny you say that because, like, um, I think there's starting to be a little bit of a shift because you're starting to get uh, some personalities coming out, especially in the professional sector of like NHRA,
Hmm.
PDRA
Yep.
stuff like that. But in the most personalities you see are like in the grudge world.
Yep. I
There's
agree.
really no sponsors in the grudge world. You know what
No.
I mean?
And the cars
Um,
still have names. I mean, it's kind
yeah,
of cool. That's why I really like going to a lot of the grudge races, because these guys have personality. I mean, they're yelling and screaming at each other. And the first time I ever went to a grudge race in recent times, I thought these guys were going to come to blows. I mean, I
yeah,
thought these guys were going to beat the hell out of each other. And then I see them in the pits like 15 minutes later, and they got their arms around each other, and hey,
yep,
bro, and blah blah blah, and all that type of stuff. And it's a family in that deal too.
yep,
But some of the shit talking, if you will, is part of the personality in it and makes it cool. But the fact that the cars have names, that's that's badass.
exactly, exactly. So before we sign off, did you want to shout anybody out, shout the business out, anything like that?
Well, it's total racing components, and I I downsized some years back in the total racing components part because I wanted to give more personality into what was going on and put the personal touch into each carburetor and spend some time on the phone with the customers and things like that. So even if you don't have one of my carburetors, I don't care. Give me a call. I'll be glad to help you out. Or I've even tuned on a lot of people's cars that didn't buy a product from me. So that I don't care. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are in the engine building world. I have a lot of friends that are in the carburetor building world and what have you. And we're all competitors, but we're all family to some aspect. I mean, I got several really good friends of mine, really knowledgeable people in the carburetor world that if I got a problem with something, I give them a call. I mean, I've been on the dyno before. I give them a call and we've talked it out and then figured it out, and they've done the same to me.
Right.
I'm not so naive to know that to think that I know everything because I don't. And I've made some mistakes over the years, and you kind of learn from those mistakes.
Right.
in the business world and in the carburetor world or tuning or whatever the case may be. I mean, we're all human.
Yeah. No, yeah. So yeah, reach out to Craig, Total Racing Components. You can find him on Facebook. He's one of my friends on Facebook, so you can just go to my mutual friends list. And any other way they can find you? You're on Instagram, right?
Yep, on Instagram, do a little bit of stuff on TikTok. I've kind of found TikTok here lately, but which
You're
is,
way ahead of me then because I don't do TikTok.
TikTok's kind of addicting a little bit. I mean, I'll wake up for that. I'm getting a little older, so I got to get up and use the restroom in the middle of the night. So when I come back to bed before I go to sleep, I'll flip through TikTok for a little while. So uh, yeah, so we're on all of them, and I keep my cell phone on me, and I text customers all the time. And they send me pictures of spark plugs and all kinds of crazy ass stuff. But we try to do what we can to help, and there's sometimes that we let the customers down. I mean, my theory is, you could stand on the corner handing out $100 bills, and somebody's going to bitch that there's just a wrinkle. So you never make everybody happy, and
Right.
but we try. We certainly try, and as you can tell from the whole deal here, I mean, we do this as a family. I mean, my mom, my dad still goes to the racetrack a lot of times with us, and my sister and brother-in-law and my nephew races. He has a drag through the race. They're at Spring Fling. Well, they're getting rained on right now, but Jeff and my nephew are at the Spring Fling right now, which is one of the biggest bracket races that's happening in Bristol. So we go to the racetrack as a family, and then obviously it's more of a family once we get there with our racing family.
Right. Right. That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great having you. Um, you know, uh definitely a wealth of knowledge over the years, right? And I call you myself all the time to get advice on tuning, driving, all that fun stuff. You know what I mean? So feel free to reach out to Craig if you have any questions about your program. And that's it. See you later, guys.
Thanks a lot, bud.
Like this show? Want more? Then head to watchpttv.com, the new 100% free PowerTube TV streaming network. Home of the best classic and new motorsports racing and build shows on the web.